Welcome to Breaking the Mold, a podcast from Action Funder. Here at Action Funder, we work with businesses and we work with non-profit leaders. We enable the two to work together to create measurable change. In this podcast, we're going to introduce you to some of the change makers we work with, we know and we admire. They'll be coming to us from boardrooms and community centres across the country. Together, we'll tackle questions about sustainability, about working in partnership, and about achieving real impact. Get ready to hear about what challenges and drives these people who are dedicated to taking action on the issues that really matter.
Hi, I'm Mark Shearer, and I'll be your host again for this episode of Breaking the Mold. Today, I'm meeting with the brilliant Richard Walker, who's the Executive Chairman of Iceland, one of the leading retailers in the UK. In addition to his work at Iceland, Rich is wearing many hats. He's been an advocate and leading figure for sustainable businesses, a published author, and also a former chair of Surfers Against Sewage, to quote just a few things. In this episode, we talk about his mission to democratise sustainability, and in particular, we touch on three things. The first is his trailblazing policies that Iceland has put in place to remove palm oils and plastics from their products. Certainly not an easy task, but something that has been really instrumental. Secondly, the role of businesses in raising awareness about key global issues. And thirdly, how businesses can really use their influence to advocate for nationwide policy changes that benefit their communities, even if that means breaking the rules just a little bit. Let's dive in. Rich, thank you very much for coming on Breaking the Mold podcast. Great to see you. We should say to the viewers that we do know each other beyond work.
Very well. Yes.
Very well. So we've known each other for about 20 years, I think it's coming up to now.
I think so.
And I've watched your career flourish and you take on all the broadcasters and all the interviewers. So it's wonderful to now be sat here interviewing you. So I will...
this could be my greatest test, maybe.
I think so. I think I've got enough knowledge to take you down. Unlike, Piers Morgan couldn't do it, so maybe I can.
No, exactly.
So look, first of all, I just want to talk a bit about Business for Good. What's your vision for a better world? What's your personal vision? And I suppose, why do you want to go off that? What motivates you to achieve that vision?
Crikey.
That's a big one to start with.
It is a big one to start with. I suppose I've always been interested in kind of nature and the outdoors. I was lucky enough to grow up in the countryside. And, I'm personally a big climber and a surfer, and I've always kind of engaged with the outdoors and the natural world like that. But I think having kids has really kind of propelled that desire to try and protect what we have, because I see them engaged with the nature on our doorstep, be that like bugs or butterflies or bees. And I've got a very kind of strong passion to try and protect the things that they love. And obviously our world is changing very quickly, and that's now unequivocal and widely agreed. And I don't want them to be able to only see orangutans in Chester Zoo. And I don't want them to grow up in a sterile, very nature depleted environment. So, that's why I'm motivated to try and help with the climate crisis, the nature crisis, and try and use the platform I've already got to do some good along the way.
Yeah, nice. And do you see the nature climate crisis as the biggest crisis humans are facing at the moment? I know you've never shirked a challenge. So is it a sense of, right, this is what humans need now, and so this is what I'm going to try and improve?
Yeah, I think it's undoubtedly an existential crisis. The problem is it's hard to see it until it's right on top of us. When you look what's going on around the world, there are so many challenges, and I think now it's unavoidable to have to confront that, whereas maybe 10 years ago it wasn't kind of top of the list of worries. Obviously there's more pressing concerns, and humans by their very nature are quite myopic and will deal with whatever the biggest crisis on top of them is, be that COVID or cost of living crisis. But undoubtedly kind of the big existential crisis that we face is the decline of our natural world, and obviously global warming.
Yeah, and with you had an amazing trip to Borneo, and I think that really, when talking about first-hand experiences, was that quite a turning point for you as well?
Yeah, I think
going on out there.
Yeah, it's really important to witness and to experience for yourself. as opposed to just be sort of a commentator on the sidelines. And that was particularly important for palm oil, because it's a very nuanced issue. There's two sides to the debate. And I really needed to go and understand it for myself. So it was important to go to West Kalimantan with experts, meet local communities, go to the primary rainforest. And, we visited orangutan sanctuaries and kind of heard stories of habitat loss and met local indigenous communities. So, we really got the kind of full spectrum of views and problems there. And I think it was very important, particularly as a food retailer that was complicit in, a lot of the issues that have been caused out there. So, yeah, to actually get out of the boardroom and into the real world is really important. And that's the case for anything, whether it's visiting food banks or going out and seeing our shops or meeting politicians. It's just very important to get out there.
Yeah, 100%. And we'll come on to the politics in a minute. But look, so you've obviously used the platform at Iceland to make a better world and to help the natural world and raise awareness. Can FMCG ever be sustainable? And if so, how? I mean, obviously, palm oil, plastics, etc. But what's your next big challenge, I suppose? And but it'd be really interesting to hear about whether you think we can create that world that you would like to see more of.
Yeah, no, I mean, the reality, and Yvonne Chouinard has said this, the founder of Patagonia, big kind of business hero of mine, but the reality is there's no business in existence that puts more back into the natural world than it takes from it. That just can't, it's not possible. So there is really no such thing as a sustainable business. That's the reality. And I think we've got to be very careful sort of banding the word around, and, particularly gets my back up when you just sort of prefix any word with sustainable and then think it's okay, like sustainable flying or whatever. Like there isn't sustainable FMCG, there isn't really sustainable business. But what you can do is understand your impacts, seek to minimize them wherever possible, and then share what you learn with others. There are some amazing businesses out there. There's a search engine, for example, I found the other day called Ecosia, which uses all of its advertising money to plant trees. I mean, that is, there are some exceptional kind of cutting edge businesses there that are probably on the cusp of putting more back into nature than they take from it. But, when in the FMCG world, which is the original question, I really don't think it's possible. But what we can do, if you take a business like Iceland, we've got 5 million customers a week. And some of them are really hard up and on a very tight budget. So they can't afford to spend more for sustainable lifestyle choices, like you're charged more for sustainable products at Waitrose or Marks and Spencer's. I mean, our customers can't afford to do that. But what we're trying to do on palm oil, on plastics, on reducing food waste, on a really aggressive program to reduce carbon, all of these things I say is democratizing environmentalism, because we're making it relevant and relatable to our customers who are real people on a budget. And that's quite exciting, because if we can make it apply to them, then it's genuinely scalable.
Yeah, and interesting you say that, because we've obviously worked with you in the past on increasing access to nature for the most deprived areas of the UK. And I think there was a shocking stat that children in the areas of deprivation have 9 times less access to green space than those in the most wealthy areas.
Yeah.
So look, moving on to a family business, you obviously work very closely with your dad. We've seen that you're very close. Well, lots of posts, updates, etc. First of all, it's a huge responsibility, right? That you're having to take on something that has been started in the family. But secondly, how does that enable you to do things at Iceland and create campaigns and so on that maybe if you were working in a more in a FTSE 100 or whatever, you'd struggle to do? Do you find it easier or harder being a family business to make some of these interventions?
Yeah, I think it is easier because we're answerable only to ourselves. We're the shareholders. Our culture, just as a business, is quite irreverent, and we try and zig when others zag. And I think that's been a big reason for why we've stayed in business and indeed grown our market share over 50 plus years in what is an exceptionally competitive industry. And we're up against big Goliaths, in terms of our competitors. But to sort of think long term as a family business is probably our biggest benefit. So we were a public company for quite some time, and Dad talks about this constant treadmill of having to go down every quarter to please teenage scribblers, as he called them, 20-somethings just out of university who are the analysts on the Iceland stock. And, unless you're constantly increasing your profits quarter by quarter, you've got a problem. And I think that engenders short-term thinking, whereas a lot of the decisions we take in terms of removing plastic, investing in palm oil, etc., that's quite long-term in our thinking, but we have a phrase that we're long-term greedy. So, we don't take the easy options for the now. We take the harder options for the long term, but hopefully that will pay back. And, everything that we're doing, particularly with the cost of living crisis at the moment, we started a food club giving out interest-free loans so customers could afford to spend money on food in our shops rather than go to food banks. We give 10% off to over 60s every Tuesday. We've frozen excuse the pun, the price of all of our £1 lines. So we're doing a lot of different things. And we think that customers will stick with us in the good times because they'll remember how we treated them through this cost of living crisis.
Yeah, great. And look, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but you lost your mum recently. And how much of a part did she have to play in what you do and your decision making and so on? Because I know that had a very close relationship, and sometimes it's the wives, your mothers, your wider family that provide that motivation and so on. So
yeah,
I'll ask you about her influence on you in a lot of this.
Yeah, no, of course. Well, it's her fault the government of Iceland are suing us for breach of copyright, which is genuinely happening, although we'll win. She thought of the name Iceland. Dad wanted to call it Penguin, which would have been a disaster. But I suppose, her getting diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's was a big kind of turning point for me, because it sort of showed me that life is very short and my time on this planet might be limited, but also to try and learn and contribute to this amazing legacy that she started with my dad. Dad always gets referenced, but actually it was Mum and Dad who started that first shop in Oswestry in 1970. And like I said, Mum thought of the name and she worked on the till. And I wanted to kind of understand that more. So it was a big reason for why I moved to Iceland and moved on from property, which is originally what I was doing. So it was a big motivator, and I do think about her a lot.
Yeah, well, I'm sure she'll be super proud. I mean, when I see you on Question Time getting drilled by various politicians or presenters in holding your own, even I'm incredibly proud that I know you. So look, moving on a bit. So community, obviously at Action Funder, we're all about community. We've worked with you in the past. You run sustainability and community building at Iceland, and you do some really interesting stuff. So obviously rehabilitation of ex-inmates. We work with you on backyard nature. You've made various announcements, things like formula milk, democratizing sustainability, and so on. What are you most proud of? It sat right here, right now, on a gloomy November morning. What do you sit back and think, I'm really proud I did that?
Well, oh God, that is a good question.
I'm giving you all these. Sorry, I shouldn't be.
Yeah, you are.
I'm giving you all these quite direct questions. You see, I should be arguing with you like Piers Morgan, but actually, I know the best way to.
Formula is an interesting one, right? So, that, and it's not me. It's like all the team around me and the people who are working hard putting these campaigns together and spotting the opportunities. But formula is interesting because you're not allowed to price fight on formula milk stage 1 because we're supposed to encourage breastfeeding and breast is best. But it is quite archaic, these laws, particularly in the context of the price of formula milk going through the roof. It's now 15, 16 quid for a week's supply of formula. So it's, many mums are skipping feeds or stealing it, because they're in such desperate times. So we dropped the price and told everyone about it, which is illegal. And now we're lobbying the government to try and get rid of this law, which seems ridiculous because I can I can promote the price of vape products or chocolate or beer, but not of stage 1 formula, which just seems bonkers. And actually, I learned a week or two ago that Wes Streeting said that, if and when he becomes health secretary, that is a law that they'll seek to change. And I think that's probably kind of direct result of some of our campaigning and awareness raising of the issue. So, that's good. I mean, at the other end of the scale, I think palm oil was a big thing for me. It was something I was very passionate about. Like I said, I went to the effort of going and witnessing it all. But Google searches of the phrase palm oil went up 10,000% after our campaign. And we did it really to raise awareness. And I think that's very much what we did.
Yeah, well, it was brilliant, and obviously around Christmas and the advert and so on, it was great.
It was banned from TV because it was deemed too political. So we just put it out on social media, and then everyone started retweeting it. It's now been watched over 90 million times, and it's the most watched Christmas TV ad in UK history. So that sort of rewrote the rules of paid advertising, I think.
Yeah. So talking about being an irreverent brand earlier. I can see it coming through there. And have you ever spent a night in prison with any of these activities that you've done, or not? Have you never been arrested yet for it?
No, although I'm told if I go back to Indonesia, I will be. So I should maybe try that, because I'm a big surfer and I'm desperate to go there to Bali. But yeah, maybe that's not such a good idea.
We'll have to go in disguise or something like that.
Yeah.
And so, Rich, what's a campaign that hasn't gone right? Because obviously you have to be quite daring to win and get the message out there, and sometimes they don't go right. So
I think transparency is just really key. So take palm oil. Yes, it was very, it was very successful, but actually there was an interesting kind of postscript that happened in terms of we gave ourselves a self-imposed deadline that any product with Iceland on the label wouldn't have palm oil in, and by the end of 2018. And we got to December, and it was very clear that we had about 16 products out of about 450 where we couldn't meet that deadline because our suppliers weren't ready. So we took Iceland off the label. And I didn't really think anything of it. But then I think I was away with you, actually, in the January on a ski trip. And I got this absolute gotcha moment from the BBC with the before and after product of, Iceland on the packaging and then Iceland not on the packaging. And their theme was, rather than remove palm oil, they just removed Iceland from the label. Now, obviously, it was very unfair because they didn't focus on the 97% of products where we'd worked tirelessly for 2 years to take out palm oil. They just focused on those 16 products, and we only gave our suppliers an extra 16 weeks. And by April 2019, indeed, they got rid of the palm oil and were able to put Iceland back on the label. But it was a real media gotcha moment. And I learned a lot then about how the media operates. I was also really pissed off because I'd, teed myself up there for it. And there was an important lesson as well, just about transparency. If I'd have written a blog just before we boarded the flight to Chamonix or wherever we were going on the 1st of April and said, 1st of January and said, you know what, this has happened and this is why, and here's what we're doing about it, it wouldn't have been an issue. So I've tried to be as openly kind of transparent and clear and talk about the journey on everything we're doing, particularly on plastics, actually. We said we'd be plastic free by the end of 2023. That was in 2018. We gave ourselves 5 years. That hasn't quite happened, but we've worked very hard and we've reduced our plastic tonnage by over 50% now. So a huge reduction. And the destination hasn't changed, but I've been very clear for a lot of reasons, COVID, slower technological advancements, etc. It's just going to take us longer to get to that destination.
But having these targets is so important because it really sets that the mindset.
Yeah.
It gives people the ability to try to create something within a period of time that they wouldn't otherwise do. So, and setting ambitious targets as well, it creates that momentum. So
you create that North Star. I think is really important.
Yeah, and but no, look, I fully respect your transparency on this. And I think you need to learn. I mean, look, I know you didn't go to media school. You and I were in property originally. Yeah. And so, obviously you learn on it, but fessing up and being transparent is great. Now, look, I'm going to whiz us through some stuff. So politics. First of all, what's it like being a personality in the kind of business for good arena? I think you enjoy it because you're very good at it. But people look to you as for leadership, and what's Richard Walker doing now? Do you enjoy that, or does it feel quite burdensome?
I do. I think I wrote a book as well called The Greengrocer, and when that came out in 2021, I was obviously keen to sell books. It was everything goes to charity, but I wanted to sort of talk about it more. So I did a lot of this sort of thing, but a lot of keynotes. But I found that I was talking more about doing it rather than actually doing it. So I've sort of consciously taken a step back in terms of that circuit, if you like, because at the end of the day, the bread and butter are our 1,000 shops and our colleagues and our business. And it's really important never to forget that. I think I can get distracted by all the different opportunities and things that are available and open. And you're much better doing less things brilliantly than a lot of things averagely. But I do enjoy it. And I enjoy things like Question Time, and I think I've been on that 7 times now. Actually, they said I was on recently. So I enjoy kind of speaking out on issues that I think our customers care about, which maybe they don't have the opportunity to do so.
And do you have other retail leaders speaking to you saying, you are a personality, we'd like to join or help or work with you on these campaigns, or we think this is an important issue, and so on? So you do collude a bit as retailers, hopefully.
Yeah, a bit. I mean, we did through COVID a lot. There was weekly calls, and that was very interesting in terms of the camaraderie and the sharing of ideas and information, which for the greater good, to help feed the nation. But the default setting for UK food retailers is to wake up and want to kill each other every morning. So, make no bones, it's an exceptionally competitive environment. But what is nice on some issues, like the COVID crisis, but also plastics, for example, there is a sort of greater good information sharing, which I think can only be a good thing.
Yeah, great, which I think you've really spearheaded as well. So I've got to ask this. So obviously you renounced your Conservative Party membership recently. Is that politics now put in a box and left for later, or are you looking to remain in politics but join another party, or what's the thinking?
It is. It was a big story. I mean, it was most read, I think, on BBC, and they played a clip of me on Laura Kuenssberg to the Prime Minister and got him to respond. I mean, it was quite a big deal, and I basically said that the party has lost its way, with the needs of business and everyday people. And it came after a very long process of trying to get selected as a candidate for a seat. Now, many people, probably quite rightly, say, well, that was just sour grapes. But actually, what I learned through the process is that they don't want people like me with genuine kind of experience and opinions of my own. And I was told to pipe down on things like the sewage scandal. They really didn't like the fact I was chairman of Surfers Against Sewage. I was told by a very senior person within the party to stop talking about food banks. And these are all things that I really care about and I wasn't prepared to do. So I kind of fell out of love with it before I even got started. But it is quite sad because I had this itch, and I think I still have an itch, that I want to contribute and do good. Now, I can do that through my business, and I think for now, that's very much kind of what I'm focusing on. But I'm sure it's not the last chapter. I think I've probably pretty much burnt all bridges now with the Tories. But there are other ways to help and contribute. I don't want to be an MP anymore. I've sort of chased that dream, and unfortunately it hasn't happened. And it is really sad, actually, that our system is kind of set up to discourage and exclude people with experience from the outside. But that's just how it is. So we'll see where we get to. I mean, there's an awful lot of problems in our society, problems with our environment, and I'm still very keen to contribute. I'm just not sure how that will be.
Yeah. So taking a breather for the moment. Well, don't totally write it off. No. I know that you've shown a lot of leadership and change within our country, and I know a lot of people respect you for it. So I suppose it's about finding the right medium to do that. Now look, let me move you on to COP, and then we'll wrap up after that. So obviously it's taking place in UAE, which raises a few eyebrows, and we often see this where a big event such as COP is being hosted in a big oil producing nation. I mean, do you think that that's a problem? Or do you think that actually, look, that's the way the world works, everyone's got to crack on with it?
Yeah, I think the latter. I mean, my wife winces when I'm called an environmentalist because, I mean, I try to be, but I've got a large personal carbon footprint that I try and minimize as much as possible. But obviously our business is a high volume mass market discount food retailer with many contradictions, and we are far from a sustainable business, but we're trying to do good. And I think it's the same for nation states. Yes, there's a lot of contradictions in an oil nation hosting COP, but that shouldn't stop them from trying to do better, as long as it's not greenwashing. And I think that's the same in business and personally as it is politically. And I think it's really important that we start to see genuine kind of, not just warm words, but genuine intent and action now. So that's what I'd like to see out of COP. But I don't think I've got a problem in and of itself that it's hosted in the UAE. No.
And so, are you hopeful stuff will be achieved? Or, I mean, if COP made an announcement after the conference saying, right, we're going to do X, what would that be in your mind? What would you want them to try to achieve?
It's a great question, and I think I'm as guilty as others as being a bit distracted with the day-to-day cost of living crisis. As a retailer, we've just got Christmas around the corner. And actually, I haven't spent too much time thinking about that, which is a really, as I said, it's our biggest existential issue. But what is the next step? What do we want to see? But now we've got legally binding targets. What we need to do now is make steps to do things that are concurrent with decarbonising. That's what we have to do.
So enforcing those legal targets, really.
Yeah. How it's enforced and a just transition and everything else in between. That's the tough bit. And we all know why we need to change, because the world is burning and nature's declining. We all know what we need to do, which is decarbonize and restore nature. But how you do that is the real tough bit. And that involves compromises and tough choices and trade-offs, and is full of grey area and ambiguity. But, that's what we've got to see now, as opposed to just inevitable emissions going up and up and up.
Last thing, we always have a takeaway to help listeners start to make more of a positive impact in their workplace. So the Rich Walker takeaway, I'll speak for another 10 seconds so you can think of something really good. But but I think this is something that's very practical, and anyone listening would be like, okay, that makes a lot of sense. I'm going to give that a crack. So the one thing that listeners should be thinking about, or the takeaway from having heard this podcast.
I love that. I'll give you two, which came from, I suppose, my business hero, my dad, because he is an extraordinary guy. He's created this amazing business. He's done some incredible things along the way as well. And he gave me two bits of advice. The first one is testament to his belligerence and tenacity. And it's very simply, never, ever, 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 ever give up. And it's easier said than done. And the second one was when I decided to leave property and join Iceland. He gave me some warm advice from a father to a son. He said in his Yorkshire accent, whatever you do, don't fuck it up. Sorry,
very good.
Are we allowed to swear on this pod? I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure you can. We'll check with the team here, but very good advice. And I take that first, never give up. I mean, with Action Funder, we're we've been going for a couple of years, and there are so many hurdles at times you'd be like, oh, this is tough. We've launched over 150 funds, funded over 800 community projects across the UK, benefiting around about 500,000 people. And we've had about 1,700 updates on our site so far from those funded projects. So, it's just the start.
Great. I mean, that is genuine kind of local level improvement and tangible kind of results. And I think that probably, in terms of fulfillment, makes you feel as good as anything,
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Breaking the Mold. This was actually the last episode of our first season. You can hear from all of our guests, brilliant leaders from the private and charitable sectors creating change on your favourite podcast platform. For more content on community engagement, go to the Action Funder website at www.actionfunder.org. Here you'll be able to search from grassroots non-profits near you and learn more about how to make an impact for people, planet and profit.